all the time. She got a booty like a Cadillac. Oh, I could send her in an overdrive.
This next story is quite fascinating. It's kind of like the Hunger Games, or maybe Game of Thrones. In the kingdom of Trump, there's so much infighting. Everyone's stabbing everyone in the back. People's heads are getting chopped off. I mean, figuratively. There are threats and secret messages, and the president pitting people against each other. This week's latest being the new communications director and the chief of staff. Reporters have been coining this battle as the battle to the death, as the fight is going on both in tweets and on TV. Most of this centers around the new communication director, Anthony Scaramucci, who's also known as the MOOCH. He came on Fox News and said he doesn't like the way people are always being nice to your face and then stabbing you in the back. He said he's not like that. Instead, he will stab you in the front. He said he's more of a front stabber. He has basically been hired to get rid of the leakers in the Trump White House. But of course, on his first day, he claimed someone leaked something about him, that his assets were worth $85 million, which, considering the others working at the White House, makes him one of the poorest people there. He claims Reince Priebus, the White House chief of staff, might have leaked it, but it also turns out that all of that info is actually accessible to anyone because it's public record, because it was on his disclosure statement. Now, his first days on the job, he talked to a reporter from the New Yorker about a story that was leaked to that reporter about a dinner he had with the president, Sean Hannity from Fox, and some other guys. He said he's asking the reporter for the source of the article, but when the reporter refused to give him the source, the White House communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, said, okay, I'm going to fire everyone in the office, and then you haven't protected anybody. So the entire place will be fired over the next 2 weeks. Of course, the reporter still would not give up his source. The problem here being that if he were to fire everyone, then he would have to hire people in those positions, and they would know that he's the kind of guy that would fire everyone. As the conversation went on, he began to talk about Reince Priebus, the chief of staff, who he described as an effing paranoid schizophrenic, a baronac. Did I say that right? Now, later in the interview, he actually started to imitate Reince Priebus. Now, I can't read the exact words he said, so I'm going to replace them with some more because the words are so hard. So we're going to replace those words with the word cantaloupe. So he's imitating the White House chief of staff, and he says, let's leak the effing thing and see if I can cantaloupe block these people the way I cantaloupe blocked Scaramucci for 6 months. That was him imitating the White House chief of staff. He goes on to say, I've asked people not to leak things for a period of time and give me a honeymoon period, and they won't do it. Of course, this is after he threatened to fire everyone. Then he said, I'm not trying to build off my brand off the effing strength of the president. I'm here to serve the country. I'm not Steve Bannon. I'm not trying to blank my own cantaloupe. Basically, he's saying Steve Bannon is only there to make himself famous. I think if I'm getting all the metaphors correct, I don't think Steve Bannon could actually do those things physically. He's kind of a big guy. But anyway, the MOOCH followed this up by saying, in regards to Reince Priebus, yeah, let me go because I got to start some tweeting to make this guy crazy. Now, funny enough, he actually did send out a tweet that night that said, in light of the leak of my financial disclosure info, which is a felony, I will be contacting the at FBI and at Justice Department, #swamp at Reince45. That, of course, being directed at Reince Priebus, who he seemingly has now accused of leaking his financials from his government disclosure forms. But as I have said before, all of the disclosure forms are publicly accessible because, well, they were disclosed. Now, the next day, Scaramucci went on CNN to talk about leaking problems going on in the White House. He said that he spoke to the president and he said to the CNN reporters, I was talking to the president, and if CNN is nice to me, then the president will let me come back on the show. Is that cool? He starts by saying that if this were 150 years ago, they would hang the leakers. But does that mean he wants to hang the leakers? Well, one of his previous quotes was, what I want to do is effing kill all the leakers, and I'm going to get the president's agenda on track so we can succeed for the American people. Then he goes on again in the CNN interview about Reince Priebus, saying that Reince and he are like brothers, but sometimes brothers can fight like Cain and Abel. And sometimes brothers can fight and get along, but he's just not sure if this fight is repairable or not. Now, I don't know, if we remember from Sunday school, I believe Cain bashed in his brother's head with a rock and then lied to God about it, but I guess we'll see how that goes. So the big question that day was, is Reince Priebus going to stick around to fight it out with the MOOCH or follow the press secretary, Sean Spicer, and pack it up and leave? Well, we got one day to really think about it, because the very next day, Reince Priebus, the White House chief of staff, quit or was fired or kind of both. Then, for the heck of it, the MOOCH appeared on the BBC telling a reporter that Trump is not an elitist, in which the reporter kept asking the MOOCH, what part of Trump is not an elitist? Is it the business side or the politics side or the inheritance side? What part of Donald Trump is not an elitist? He's a celebrity, he's a billionaire. So Scaramucci said, well, what about the fact that he eats cheeseburgers and pizza? To which the reporter said, that doesn't make any sense. We all eat cheeseburgers and pizza. To which the MOOCH replied to the reporter, you're acting like a bit of an elitist now. So this comes after Trump's lawyer and top advisor Michael Cohen said before to a reporter on the record, I'm going to mess up your life. For as long as you're on this freaking planet, you'll never know how to get out from underneath it. Rest assured, you will suffer the consequences. So you do whatever you want. You want to ruin your life at the age of 20? You do that, and I'll be happy to serve it right up to you. So I'm warning you, tread very effing lightly, because I'm going to be going to you. This is effing disgusting. You understand me? Anyway, that's what the Trump's top advisor talking to a reporter. Then, you remember that guy Mark Kasowitz, the lead attorney for Trump in the Russian investigation 2 weeks ago? We were talking about it here on the Jam, who flipped out at some random guy and sent him a threatening email with all kinds of cuss words and telling him to watch his back and I know where you live. Now, the difference between those guys who are top advisors to Trump and Scaramucci is that he's the communications director of the White House. The, AKA the MOOCH, is the representative of the President of the United States. So these kinds of are the kinds of people the president likes to have in his White House. So far, the list of people who have been fired or resigned keeps growing and growing. The White House Communications Director, the White House Press Secretary, National Security Advisor, Deputy National Security Advisor, Head of the Government Office for Ethics, Deputy White House Chief of Staff, Vice President's Chief of Staff, the FBI Director. All are fired or quit. And now we get to see all these new people that he's bringing in. Now, in a related story that sort of fits together with this, the Boy Scouts of America issued a public apology last week for what the U.S. president said during a speech at its National Jamboree. This is a tradition in America that the president would give a speech at the national meeting of the Boy Scouts in which some 45,000 young boys attend. This year, Trump gave a speech to a huge crowd of boys, as presidents do. Usually presidents talk about growing up and being good, doing things for your community. But President Trump did not go down that easy path. Instead, he decided to push his slogans, promote his political agenda, and make cutting remarks about the press and his opponents. You know, the usual stuff found in a Trump campaign speech. But after the speech, there was a major outrage, mostly from the parents of the young boys. So the Boy Scouts sent out a carefully worded apology saying, "We sincerely regret that politics were inserted into the scouting program." The speech itself was mostly just rambling about subjects that most kids couldn't understand anyway. He boasted about his record on energy, jobs, healthcare, his victory in the Electoral College, and the record size of his crowds. He threatened to fire his own health secretary if a healthcare bill did not pass. He also implied that he could use more Scout-style loyalty, which was a kind of a rip to his own attorney general, which was a subject most likely was over the head of, kids that are 12 years old. Which leads to a story about the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who used to be the president of the Boy Scouts. But because of things that are going on, there's a new term that's been coined and going around. It's called Rexit. Will the Secretary of State be the next person to resign because of personal differences with the president? Will James Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, also resign just because the president waited until he was on vacation before he tweeted about a ban on transgender people in the military? Has the White House come so toxic to breathe and for what we think is for the normal folks there? From now on, the only people the president will hire were people that send electric shocks to the news cycle. So the real news, or what we used to call the real news, is buried so deep that it eventually comes forgotten. The White House has gone from crazy to strange to downright mean this week. I can't wait to see what word we're going to use to describe for next week. This is Eric McCain here on The Jam. We're on DCRJ Radio, talking about things going on around the world.